Hi, and welcome to this episode 9 of the rEView podcast. I'm Natalie Turner, and today I have a couple of guests with me who can be described as serial entrepreneurs in the EV space. I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm George Daaboul, CEO of Everest Biolabs.
And I'm David Freedman, Chief Operating Officer at Everest.
Okay, guys, so you've got some pretty exciting stuff coming up over the next few weeks. At the time of this podcast recording, it is, I would say, unknown, or you're still operating in stealth mode, but you're leading up to a product launch or company launch at AAEV. And that's coming up in the next few days. Why don't you go ahead and tell everyone about what you're doing?
So at Everest Biolabs, we took our experience from Nanoview Biosciences, being in the analytics EV field, on addressing the analytical needs for EV space. So we're coming up with a set of products to address both automation, sample prep, and analyzing EVs accurately and reproducibly. And our aim of
Awesome.
the company really is focused on how to have scientists focus on the science and less on the nuances on sample prep and analytics.
Yeah, so essentially taking the grunt work out of everything that's involved to get to the analytical stage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so at Nanoview, we're running some clinical studies, and most of our time is on the bench, pipetting, uh, and watching samples drip. So we're like, there must be a better way to do this if you're really going to enable this space to go into clinical applications.
Right. Why don't we, because you mentioned it, Nanoview. So why don't we go back to the beginning from where you started in EVs? So what led you to working in this space? What kind of gaps you saw and how that all came about leading up to when you started Everest Biolabs?
Genesis
Yeah, we
of
can
it.
go
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
So David and I met back in 2000,
20, we started in 2010 in the lab.
2010.
Yeah.
Yeah. So David was the postdoc in the lab. I was a grad student, and we come from an engineering background. We're trying to figure at the time there was an Ebola outbreak, I believe. So we were trying to come up with sensors to be able to diagnose or detect these infectious diseases in the field. So some that's quick, uh, direct from sample. And so we started building that technology, part of my graduate student. And as we went to commercialize, or we're both interested in entrepreneurship, like, okay, can we build a company out of this? And so we started to think about, uh, is that the right path for virus diagnostics, or is there any other applications? And then we kind of stumbled into the EV field. At the point, Marcella Chiari was a big collaborator of ours in Italy, and she was starting to get into EVs. Like, this looks interesting. And it was the first time where I read every review article complains about EV characterization. It's like, okay, we built something that looks at nanoparticles, but was viruses, but those are very similar, same size range. So like, let's look into this more. So we attended a couple conferences, wrote a paper, and then we kind of just fell in love with the space. Like, okay, this is a space where there's a lot of excitement about new technology. Um, so that's kind of then we pivoted Nanoview to focus solely on EVs and exosomes.
Yeah, and I would just add for the viewers there that are either thinking about entrepreneurship, we went through a program called Innovation Core or iCore and NSF. And so that was when we really started looking outside of the lab to make sure that we could commercialize the technology, that we were actually solving a problem, a real need. And so that was a critical part of that journey. And then, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You hit the nail on the head. We do like to complain about all the very necessary characterizations that everyone has to do because anyone working in the space knows that the biggest hurdle is to prove that you actually have EVs and it's not just background or something else, some unintended consequence of the isolation method that was used. Definitely meeting an unmet need there. So with Nanoview, you ended up selling that off, right?
Yeah, we built that company. So I think the EV journey started at about 2017, and I mean the gold standard then was nanoparticle tracking (NTA), and so we were really adding that biological component because we could probe the surface with different proteins and antibodies.
Mm.
Um, and so that company grew, and in 2022 we were approached by a company called Unchained Labs that ended up acquiring us, and we built that product and then evolved it. It's actually now able to see 35 nanometer exosomes and extracellular vesicles, and now it's called the Leprechaun. And so that lives on, and so now we're ready to start something new, and that's when Everest basically was formed early this year.
So you've started Everest at the start of this year, and you're already ready to hit the market. That's impressive. I guess so. Were you before you started Everest? Did you have a fairly good idea of what the next steps would be? You started building those ideas beforehand, or you just thought, okay, now we're on to the next project. Let's go.
So I think from the Nanoview journey, we kind of got a pretty good idea from our experience and from our customers' experience in the space of where the pain points are. We started seeing there was a lot of proof of concept experiments showing great data either in diagnostics. I think that's where we have a lot of passion, but it's not making it to the clinic. And our firm belief is because of both the tools necessary to automate and make those large scale studies reproducible, um, and not artifact dominated. So we knew we wanted to solve that problem. But we didn't really have an idea how. So I think during that year off, between where we left Unchained Labs and the start of Everest, Dave and I were in constant contact, kind of bouncing ideas
Lots of
against each,
coffee, yeah.
yeah, ideas off each other. And then we met with David Walt out of the Wyss Institute, who's very passionate about leveraging EVs for diagnosing neurodegenerative diseases, especially Parkinson. And he had the same mission where he's trying to develop these diagnostics, and instead of developing diagnostic, he had to focus more on developing of the tools because he didn't have the tools to do that. So we said, let's build a company around that mission, and then yeah, so that's kind of how Everest started.
So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned, so David Walt, right? Walt.
Yeah.
Yes, and I am familiar, and I believe I read something very cryptic on the Wyss Institute website, maybe a few months ago at least, that said we are developing something to look at a single particle or improve diagnostics in the EV space. And I was perplexed because I'm like, well, that doesn't give me much information. And like it was on LinkedIn as well. I think Harvard put out some kind of thing and it was just this small little one pager. And I was expecting, like, oh, okay, they must have published something or good, there must be a breakthrough. And that was it. And I was curious. So was this something to do with Everest that you were kind of working on?
It was serendipitous. Those two things came together, I think, at the same time, right? As they were thinking about commercialization, we were looking for solutions to solve, and
Mhm.
so I think they were related, but they
Yeah,
weren't.
it's
Yeah,
not directly. So we're not
yep.
developing diagnostics. We're developing the tools. So that um, V's post is related to what we're doing, but it's not direct. But it's out of his lab. It's we're taking the technology component of what they've developed in that lab to build a broader platform for the whole field to use versus narrowly only thinking about just building a diagnostic for a single indication.
Yeah, beautiful. So tell me more about what the products are. I think we just glossed over it at the beginning, but tell me specifically what will you have available for people to use?
Yeah, so broadly, the mission of the company is like there's no company in the space that is addressing all three components needed, which is automation, sample prep, and analytics. So we're basically trying to develop an ecosystem where you can trust that all these different components work well and optimize together. So for first set of products, we know from our own experiences, size exclusion is one of the best way to purify EVs. the issues with size exclusion is it's very manual and not automated. So our first products are kind of to address the reproducibility of SEC and the automation of SEC. So we have an instrument that allows you to process 8 columns at once. You can watch these columns and fractionate with our recommended recipe, or people can tune or put their own recipes in there. Also, we have a set of columns um, for purification that where we spent a lot of time ensuring that they're reproducible. So when you run a study one day, you can rely on the results to reproduce it in another day. And also, we are built a suite of ELISAs to verify what you've purified. So a lot of time you just trust that you ran a purification protocol and it worked. But there's a lot of parameters and variables that could cause variability, not necessarily just your column. So we made an AV ELISA that allows you to quantify what is coming out of these purification techniques. It could be SEC, or if you're using something else, ELISA will still work. And not only does it quantify the EVs, but also we're coming up with a suite of ELISAs to look at common contaminants that people want to make sure what level they are at, or that they're properly depleted out, something like albumin or lipoproteins.
Excellent. You answered the question I was going to ask you, which was, were these just EV marker ELISAs or were they contaminants as well? So
Yeah.
you thought of everything. I was going to say, so the format of the SEC columns, are they the traditional like gravity flow, or can you put them in a centrifuge? Like how do they work?
So the our first generation is gravity flow. So we're going to the market with something that people are already familiar with. So two things we're addressing is the next generation is going to allow you to look at much higher throughput. And then also we're looking at different. I think there's a lot of literature from our group or the group of the V's and others about leveraging different modes other than size exclusion to make sure we can purify these different impurities. So we're looking into that too for uh, something we would launch next year.
Great. Yeah, I guess addressing the overlap and these biophysical properties of
Yeah.
EVs of different classes, in also considering the overlap with non-EV particles like lipoproteins and others. So yeah, very, very exciting news. So how, I mean, like we know how you kind of met and the lab, but how did you get into science in the beginning? So engineering background, but did you start off as a kid tinkering with stuff, or like you just found yourself drawn towards the sciences growing up? Like how did that go?
Yeah, I'm a big thinker as a young kid. My father is a car mechanic, so that's where I spent my weekends is working on cars. So I was always more of a problem solver, tinker. But actually, when I went to college, I wanted to go to medical school, so that was my goal. So I wanted to go into medicine. I didn't get in, so I wanted to go medicine. And the reason I picked biomedical engineering because I knew like engineers have an easier time finding a job, so that was like my plan B. So I do biomedical engineering, so it's my backup plan, but really I want to go to medical school. So I didn't get into medical school. And so then fell back into more into the engineering side of things. And that's why I'm attracted to areas like the EV field or biological sciences and tools, because I love medicine and the implication of advancing medicine and the societal benefit of that. But also, I get to play with my tinkering passion and building things. So that kind of was a sweet spot of building tools towards medical applications.
So I have a little bit different
Yeah.
story in that I came in passionate about automation. I just love automating things so that maybe you can say I'm lazy, but I just want to do something and then get it all done, and then I can have a computer or machine or something else do it. And then as I've grown older, I've become much more interested in solving these medical problems and oncology and neurodegenerative as they've affected me and my family personally. So It's really amazing to see us develop products that have the potential to impact, society in general. So that's how I started. But I'm an electrical engineer by training with the biomedical focus.
Yeah, great. I mean, I have things in common with both of those stories. So I too wanted to be a medical doctor at one point. And to be quite honest with you, I'm super grateful that I didn't end up getting in either, because in hindsight, I'm like, that would have been a terrible lifestyle decision for me. I like a bit more work-life balance, and I feel like doctors generally don't get that. Um, and yeah, automation is also, yeah, still a passion of mine, although I'm not working directly on it. But I see the need in terms of developing these things that could be applied in clinic for diagnostics. You need to think of automation and throughput. And I think is like really relevant and something that I started to look at more during the end of my PhD. But you run out of time, you can't do everything. But yeah, that's super interesting. So you're going to be at AAEV, which is the American Association of Extracellular Vesicles, and that's coming up. What will the dates actually be? Starting Sunday, so that's going to be the 10th,
Yeah.
and that's when does that run till?
13th?
Yes.
Yeah.
13th. So by the time this podcast airs, this will have already happened. So you probably would have made the rounds and met quite a few people there. Although from Nanoview, I'm sure you know quite a number of people in the space already. And then towards the end of the month, you'll be at ISEVxTech. So what do you plan to showcase at each of these? Are they going to be pretty similar? Or are you going to be doing slightly different things at each one?
Well, they're different formats, so it's kind of exciting that we get to do them back to back. I mean, AAEV will be an exciting launch, right? I mean, we're building up for the last few months, getting our products ready, getting all the, collateral ready. So that will just be an exciting moment for us and the team personally. I think that'll be a traditional conference where
Yeah.
we'll have, we'll hope to talk to people at the vendor booths. But ISEVtech is an interesting one. We didn't get to attend the one in Hawaii, which is an awesome place to go. I know that they hosted that a couple, due to COVID, it was delayed, and I know some of our team went there.
Yeah.
But we'll have demos there of all of our products. So we'll be doing a short demo there, and we hope people sign up. And we'll go through the instrument, we'll go through the SEC columns, and we'll go through the ELISAs and help answer any questions. So we're hoping to talk to lots of people and get some good feedback too as we develop new products. So we're looking forward to both conferences.
Yeah. XX is pretty cool. Yeah, I was disappointed I wasn't able to make it for the
Yeah.
last one. Uh, but it's like a conference. Like I enjoy all EV conferences, but like that's one that's just on technology.
Yeah.
So that's the focus of it. That's what everyone's thinking about. Everyone's passionate about. So that I'm really looking forward to that one.
And I think it's great how people can go there and they can get hands-on time. You don't have to have a salesperson come and demo an instrument. You get to go and just see it right there, and then you can go to the next one. It's like kids at a candy table. They can go and get all their best EV analytics and ice and sample prep technologies at one place. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, maybe specifically designed for the nerdiest of nerds, but
Yeah.
pretty enjoyable. I
I
think
like
you're
that.
right.
Yeah.
Look, you'll meet a lot of like-minded people, I'm sure. I think it's really exciting, although, yeah, I can't, if it's your first time, maybe you'd be a little bit remiss about missing out on Hawaii as as opposed to it's in Baltimore this time. But do you plan to get across to Vienna for ISEV 2025 as well?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a conference we always look forward to, even when Nanoview, yeah. And Vienna is
Yeah.
really nice to see too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some great places to visit during all of these things, and I think yeah, Vienna is going to be a very special conference. So yeah, obviously they all bring something different, like tech focus versus general like biomedical applications. I think exposure is going to be really, really important. So are there any other, like, I mean, this is specifically designed for the EV space. Are there any other meetings that you're planning on attending internationally, like more regional meetings, or because I suppose like your headquarters is the States, in Boston, correct? So
Yeah.
you'll that's the only office you have at the moment. Would the long-term plan to be to set up places around the globe?
Yeah, I mean, we'll likely have something in Europe at some point, so that'll be our next kind of operation geography. But we'll definitely be attending a lot of the major regional conferences as they come out. I mean, I know the French Society just had their meeting. I
Hmm.
think the Germans had theirs recently. So we'll have to wait for the next ones because we're launching now, so now
Yeah.
we can start going. But we'll try to go to all the different EV conferences that we can attend.
Yeah. So I think our goal is like, yeah, we want to go to the EV conferences because that's where the expertise lies. So not just getting our message out, but also learning what we should be aware of, what people are looking for in the EV space. But also our second other thing we want to do is bring the EV benefits and story outside the EV community. I think that's one thing our goal is to make sure that people that are looking for doing biomarker discovery, not just looking at ctDNA or regular proteins, we want to bring out the benefit of EVs to kind of grow the field too. So one thing we'll start doing next year is start attending uh, uh, the conferences are more biomarker and diagnostic focused to kind of for the benefit of Everest, but also kind of being
Expand the field.
ambassadors for the
Yeah.
EV field in those conferences.
So, I mean, yes, biomarkers to me is the biggest thing that has been kind of interest to people, but at the same time holding everyone back because there's this blockage. It's like you do all these biomarker discovery studies, and then that's the end of it. You don't hear anything being translated. So, um, what are the goals of Everest Biolabs in the short and long term? Are you hoping to change this and get people more into the translational space where they can actually start developing assays?
Yeah, I think part of it is the maturity of the field. I think it's just going to take time for adoption. And then I think once there's a one or two big success stories, I think people will start spending more focus on it, especially people outside the EV field. But I think one of the things we hope to accelerate that is to break down the technical barriers of getting into that space. So when we were at Nanoview, a lot of times we worked with biopharma. They didn't want to buy the instrument because they didn't have the EV experience. So they would rather us run the samples because we know how to handle EVs, we know what to look for, we knew the nuances of working with EVs. So I think as tools become more available, that they can kind of it's not going to be plug and play, but plug and play close then I think that will reduce the barriers and people will start um, looking into EVs as biomarkers. So I think that's kind of the mission of Everest is to kind of take down that barrier so people start exploring EVs more routinely in the biomarker space.
I think you nailed it, though. I
Yeah.
mean, that is our mission. It's to make it, I mean, I know you said not cookie cutter, but as a solution that's easy for anyone to use so that EVs truly become part of the multi-omic strategy, including ctDNA and CTCs or whatever it is. EVs are a core component and they become part of the standard of care.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. People who, at this point in time, people who haven't worked with EVs before, they can grossly underestimate how long it takes to get the
Yeah.
pipeline working. Having spent my entire PhD working on method development for the purpose of analytical processes, like it was way more time consuming than what I had hoped, even though I was familiar with the literature and saw these very long isolation protocols Yeah, so to streamline that in a way that makes it accessible for people, and hopefully in a generic sense, so no specialized equipment is required. Because this is what people see. They see, oh, this is means it's an ultracentrifugation protocol, so you need an ultracentrifuge, and then if you add density gradient into it, then you've got the complexity with doing the layers and the mixing of the layers that can occur, and then adding in any complementary or additional purification strategy where you're adding in additional steps, additional complexity. It can really get on top of people and probably put a lot of people off. So, yeah, this is very exciting. I'm excited to see what comes in the future. And yeah, like obviously best of luck to you with the launch and everything. But I wanted to change tack a little bit and talk about more like the business side of things, because there's going to be a lot of people listening to the podcast who are maybe in their early career stage or still students and kind of wondering what it takes to build a startup. Like what are the things involved? How do you even take that first step? And even like I'm sure you have to somehow acquire the funds to do it, or so you've got to have like a strategy. So can you share a little bit of your insight about your journey and what it took to get to where you are now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just before we tell the Nanoview story, I think it's a lot easier this time because we've done it before. So that first step is a big step. And there were I mean, first of all, having co-founder is amazing. It's like a marriage, and you want to make sure that that's a good relationship. And so, this has been fantastic. Um, and so we started. We were very fortunate in that when the company started, we had this sort of mission to support what was happening in the lab, and that was our first money in. So through a subcontract at NIH, we were able to get some money into the company. So that was really fortunate in the sense because that was flexible spending. It wasn't a grant, so we didn't have all the balance. We just had to make sure we delivered what we said we would, which at that time was a prototype instrument. But after that journey, then we focused on grants.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the I-Core program, and I'd like to maybe expand on that because for the listeners there, if you have an NSF or an NIH grant, then you're eligible for this program from both funding sources. That I think was $50,000 when we did it. It may have changed, but you get a small amount of money to basically go and understand commercialization, understand product market fit, understand really solving a pain point. And you can still do it while you're in like that 1 foot in the lab. And I think essentially it funded you while you were making that transition out of postdoc at the lab. And so that journey is short but super intense. I think it was 10 weeks where we talked to over 100 people to understand their pain points and really make sure that what we were developing. I mean, I think the main mission is you don't want to spend 3 years of your life developing something that not a lot of people or nobody needs. So you want to make sure that you're finding that product market fit from the beginning. And part of that process allows you to go out and get either grants, small SBIR or STTRs, but also talk to investors, to angels, to venture capitalists, to really communicate with them on not on the technical level, but on the market pain point and need. And so that is what whenever I talk to people that are thinking about entrepreneurship and then in the science or tech space, I always encourage to look at that program. So.
Yeah, because scientists always think, oh, if I publish a high impact paper, then it makes a good product. There's a lot more to it. But going back to the beginning, I think if someone's thinking about starting a company, I think you could do it alone, but I think it makes it much easier if you have a co-founder that you can rely on technically, but emotionally, I think it's a pretty tough thing to do. Also, doing it the first time was easier because you're naive. You don't know all the
Don't know what you don't know.
you don't know what you're getting into, and this way you're not worried about it. So and you have less. For us, we didn't have any kids or family, so there was less responsibility. So we only had to feed ourselves. So that is a good time to start, but it's good to do it with a partner. Like Dave mentioned, it's like almost a marriage. So you need someone for both technical and emotional support. And then finding mentors, especially on the business side, either through I-Corps program or previous successful entrepreneurs within your institution or something like that. That would be very helpful to kind of guide you through, building a company.
And as it relates, I think, to co-founders or advisors or mentors, is I think understanding your gaps. We're not all perfect. We're not the best at everything, but knowing what you're good at and what can complement you well is really important. I mean, on the business side, I think I talked to a lot of scientists, always looking for business people, business advice. And then just, communication is so important in making sure that you are setting up yourself for success in the long run. Hard decisions today can have a big impact in a year or 2 years. And so really being thoughtful about them and making sure you're thinking about the long-term plan can make a huge impact in what you're trying to do.
So yeah, I mean that's really insightful because yeah, I think a lot of people feel like this is a bit of a mystery shrouded in some kind of like secrecy. Like all these startups are coming. It's like how do people even get there? How do you, and you just imagine there's this beautiful, generous investor that just comes along and says, "Hey, I really believe in your work. Here's a couple of $1 million. Like, go for it." But clearly,
Doesn't work
there's
like that, at
what's
least not in our experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the entrepreneurs that do well are a little naive, but also can get over a no quickly and bounce
Yeah.
back from a no.
Thick
So
skin. Yeah.
yeah, you have to have thick skin, and I think because what you see in the news and splash are the really, really successful ones, and that's like the 0.1%, right? People don't cover all the ones that struggled, or even the ones that do make it, kind of paint the history of how they got there in the rosy picture. So people have this like beautiful, like, I don't know, journey, but it is beautiful, it's fun, but it has its ups and downs. And then getting to that multi-million-dollar round, like, it typically takes tens, even sometimes hundreds of conversations, and most of those are no's or maybe or circle back.
They're
And that's where
never a
having
no,
yeah,
right? They're just a
yeah,
no response.
yeah.
nice. Well, I thought academia was bad enough with grant rejections, but clearly there's a whole nother way to get get a no.
Yeah.
So I mean, how many, like, where do you start? What kind of format is your initial like pitch? Like, who are you pitching to? And then how do you go about setting up these conversations?
Yeah, I think one thing people also, there's like a misnomer that, like, oh, people with great ideas get money right away and they like raise these tens of $1 million and off they're going. I think people think that's like what they should be aspiring to, but that's not really how it happens. Usually these ideas are like boiling or happening on the back burner for months or even sometimes years. So don't a good idea doesn't mean it's gonna come out and then gonna be a smash hit right away. So I would say don't rush the process. Like, if you have something and you can get grant funding, get as much grant funding as you can and get as mature as you can, and build your network and team before you go uh, for VC funding. That would be my advice, because once you get VC funding,
Gotta move
you
quick.
you got to move quick. They're on a timetable, and all that matters is shareholder. Well,
Increasing your value.
I don't want to just paint a broad blanket, but really their goal is to build successful companies and return money to their shareholders. So I would, if you can get grant funding out or non-dilutive funding, and then you don't have to, like, success shouldn't be measured based on how much you raise. It should be based on how much progress you've made on your product or your vision.
Yeah, that's great. I would just add that when you're, to get going, it's really talking to people. It's
Yeah.
getting outside the building. So as you talked about getting advisors and mentors. So, I mean, take the exome space. So the first thing you do, let's say I was in a lab, is I would go talk to people that have been in the business and find out what they're working on, talk about maybe the problems there. Try not to talk so much about what you're thinking, but eventually get to that point and say, I want to validate this concept. Like, do you think there's a pain point here? Do you think if I, solve this technical challenge, will this be then translatable? And then who should I talk to about that, right? So you kind of keep talking to people and building your network until you find the right group of people and the right next steps. So that can be very helpful. And then, one piece of advice is this is a learning journey. I mean, part of to be successful, you have to be passionate. And I think most of these scientists were always excited and engineers about learning. And so entrepreneurship is the same thing. Okay, well, how do I set up a company? What's required there? Well, how do I get that? I mean, IP at a university is one step, but when you're doing it yourself, what's the right way? License agreements and things working with the tech transfer office. So you have to, I mean, it's all fun and exciting when it's new and novel. So you just look at it and say, okay, today I'm going to solve this problem. So that's what I'm going to figure out how to do it. Either I talk to people, I'm going to look things up online, and I'm going to get outside the building. And then, lo and behold, you throw things at the wall and you solve those problems. So it's just putting one foot after the other, I think.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's great advice. I also have questions about, tech transfer itself and how much of a learning curve was all of that, because there's a lot of there's probably regulatory aspects, IP, like legal stuff that as scientists we're probably very naive to until it gets to the point where we have to actually enact something because we're developing something. So did was that a something that you had a lot of outside help with initially, or completely like how involved do you have to get in that sort of process?
Yeah, for there, I think that's like the first mentor I would look for is like an entrepreneur within my alumni group. I think that they've been through that journey, they can guide you through that. But also, if you are spinning out technology from your own grad work, like yeah, your PI might be handling some of it, but you should build a relationship with the OTD office, get to know those people, your plans, and usually it could be a tough process, but they usually want to see you be successful. So as you build that relationship before you go to spin out the company, usually they'll try to be helpful too.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that stuff is cookie cutter, I would say.
Well, I was going
Yeah.
to say the opposite. I think every university, every tech transfer
Yeah.
office runs their program slightly
Yeah.
differently. So
Sure.
some groups can be, I know, and some of your other guests, some tech transfer offices have a huge staff, and some have maybe a very small supporting team. So it can just depend on that, the university you're at, and then you just have to leverage those resources, whatever they may be. I mean,
Yeah.
I agree, there's like a formula for it,
Yeah.
but if you're at one university versus another, I think it's a slightly different journey because of the way the tech transfer office. And then I just want to touch real quick. You mentioned regulatory because that, we're working in life sciences and healthcare. And so can be a really huge regulatory component. And at least at the Nanoview journey, we originally were a diagnostic company. So we were always focused on FDA and 510K, or is it going to be a PMA, or how are we going to move forward as a diagnostic? And ultimately for us, we switched into as a research tool. And so that lowered the regulatory burden. And I think that's good advice. If you can sell your product to start as a research tool and then develop diagnostics, that journey can be more manageable. Whereas if you're developing a diagnostic up front or a therapeutic, it's going to require a significant, success story to get funded to get that over the finish line because it requires a lot of resources.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably just experience in this whole process that helps guide your decision making as you go on as well, because someone who's new probably wouldn't be onto that, right? So you'd end up maybe making life a bit more difficult for yourself initially until you change direction to smooth the process out. So because you mentioned therapeutics or like I want to ask you about therapeutics in the EV space because this is something that's really you know, I feel like it's diagnostic, therapeutic. This is the exciting stuff that's happening. So, what are your thoughts on the therapeutic space in the EV field, or do you have thoughts? Because I know you're obviously a diagnostic focus, but do you see this as a potential direction that Everest Biolabs might also go in the future at some point?
I think we'll always be an analytics company. That's what we're passionate about. diagnostic focus, but if we see what we're building can progress the therapeutic space in any way, that's something we'll definitely want to do. But our mission right now is focused on analytics more broadly, and we'll fine tune it for diagnostics. But if we see a gap in the market from an analytics standpoint where it can drive therapeutics, we don't. Yeah, that's definitely something we'll look into. We are, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say at Nanoview we saw a lot of companies were buying our tool for their therapeutic character for characterizing their preps.
Yeah,
So, we'd like to see some more success stories, I think is what the field is lacking, because I know there's a lot of research going on, but it's like a chicken egg problem in that once someone's successful, I think there can be a lot of other companies solving different pain points.
yeah,
But to this point, there still hasn't. Well, I'm not familiar with one that's been like a name that we can point to as a successful therapeutic. So that's been a challenge in the field
yeah,
because yeah, until someone's successful. I mean, we're down the street actually from Exome Diagnostics, so that was a company that was developed a great product and was acquired, and now they're still running their
yeah. They
diagnostic
have an
service.
FDA approved test.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So you can point to a success story. So that's really great. So I think that we need to start seeing that in the therapeutic space, and then the field will, that will expand even faster and further once someone gets over the finish line.
yeah. The place where I see there's overlap from our Nanoview days, people use our platform for characterization, mostly to understand loading and surface characterization. Um, I believe what I believe in diagnostics, one part that's puts EVs gives EVs an advantage, or I think has a unique property is like co-localization and looking at, and this kind of been the holy grail. There's some publications out there, but there's a lot more to more room to grow. Is like, can you, if you have a pathological biomarker, can you also look at the tissue of origin? Like, can you leverage local localization on EVs to know it's coming from this tissue carrying this pathological marker and leverage that for disease diagnostics? But that same capability can be leveraged for therapeutic development where, oh, I'm trying to put these two markers to affect how it's distributed systematically and delivered. So those capabilities can overlap from an analytical standpoint. And I think that's where we can potentially help therapeutic developers how to better characterize their engineered EVs or EVs that they're trying to make with certain properties.
Yeah, definitely. So, if people want to find out more about Everest Biolabs, do you want to highlight, website details, and do you have any social media accounts or anything like that if they want to find out more?
Definitely follow us on LinkedIn. That's going to be our main, I think, place where we communicate. And then obviously our website, everestbiolabs.com, is where you can find out more about products and us and whatever news is happening, like the conferences we're going to. That's what we'd recommend. But yeah, definitely follow us on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. And do people get in touch with you directly for like solutions for whatever they're working on, or is it just like, yeah, through, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's ways to reach out to us or see
Yeah.
us at the conference.
Yeah, CSU conference. Our emails are first name, last name at Everest Biolabs. So if you want to contact us directly or through the website contact form, um, yeah, we're looking for people. Yeah, we love to hear from people if they want to use our products or if they think we're missing the mark, they want us to be focusing on something else. We kind of want to be part of the space and part of the learning journey and development of the space.
Yeah, I mean, if they're entrepreneurs and they have questions, like we were talking, we would be a great resource. We get those inbound requests a lot, and so I mean, and I know George is too. This early part of the journey is really fun and exciting, and watching people learn and develop, it's fulfilling to see how people go from that first conversation, and by the fifth conversation, like you can see that they're developing and progressing and refining their ideas. But yeah, obviously we want to help solve the EV analytics and isolation as well. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much for your time today, guys. I'm, yeah, excited for you. This will be a wild ride in a lot of ways, I'm sure. But yeah, I wish you the best of luck. And anyone listening, if you are going to ISEVxTech, make sure you find the Everest Biolabs booth and check them out. So at this point, we'll say bye to our listeners, guys. So bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Natalie. Bye.